right, let's dive into our first topic tonight. Are you ready, Chris?
Let's do it.
The ACC, are they breaking up? What's going on and who is coming to the Big 10? Well, Chris, let's dive right into this. Let me give you the background before I get your reaction, kind of lay out the foundation here for everybody and kind of what's going on a little bit, all right? So, it's been about a week or so since news broke that the ACC has 7 schools who have lawyered up to fight the grant of rights deal that runs through the year 2036, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
The exit fee to leave the ACC is $120 million. And even if you leave the ACC, the way the contracts are written, the ACC owns your school's television rights through the year 2036. So 7 schools have lawyered up to explore whether or not they can get out of this contract with the ACC. Those 7 schools are Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, NC State, Virginia, and Va Tech. That's kind of the basis right now of what we've heard as far as what's going on. Now there's a lot of ins and outs and nuts and bolts that we need to kind of screw out and dive into here, Chris. But I want you to give me your initial thoughts of when you heard this news come down the pike that there were 7 schools looking to get out of their huge contract with the ACC. No, by the way, the reason why they want to do this, it all comes down to dollars and cents. It's all
Yes.
about the money, all about the Benjamins, right? The revenue.
Yep.
Here's why. The ACC signed a contract for 20 years with ESPN and ABC back in 2016 for $17 million per school per year. Now, you take that and you compare that to, let's say, the Pac 12, who signed one in 2012 for 12 years with ESPN, ABC, and Fox. They get 20 million per school. So even though that contract was 4 years older, each school is still getting 3 million more than the ACC. Let's go to the Big 12. You know, the Big 12 just lost Texas. Oklahoma picked up Cincinnati, Central Florida, and a couple other ones. I'm forgetting who they are at this moment. But they signed a contract. They actually are going to up their contract. Their contract comes up in 2025 and is going to be with ESPN, ABC, and Fox. That's who the rumor is, and it's going to be around 32 million per school. Okay? That actually they signed it. It starts in 2025. So it starts in 2025 and it's for 6 years and it's 32 million per school. So let me put that in perspective for you. Central Florida and Cincinnati will be making quick math, 15 million more than Clemson, Florida State, Miami. Now let's look at the big 2. The SEC contract with ESPN and ABC starts in 2024, runs through 2034, so 10 years, 51 million per school. How about we talk Big 10? Big Ten's contract is with CBS, Fox, and NBC, starts this year in 2023, is only a 7-year contract. That's important here. A
Yes.
7-year contract. Each school is reportedly getting a guaranteed 67 million. However, I have heard it's 90 million, in all honesty,
Yeah.
that it's ridiculously high. But that's what was reported on CBSSports.com was 67 million per school, which is still 16 million more than the next largest conference of the SEC. So, all those things considered, Chris, what do you think here? What do you think's really going on? It's all about the money,
It is.
but what's going to happen? What's your feelings on this thing? Let's really dive into this tonight.
Well, you have the lawyers from both sides coming out and saying, "Oh, well, this is patched up. We're good. We're good." They're not good, Eric. They're not good at all. I mean, you ran down the numbers, but just to throw it out there, last year, um, the Big Ten made 845.6 million. You know, and it just it boggles the mind when you look. The ACC only made 617 million. I say only, but it really is a huge difference. You've got these seven schools who are carrying. I mean, and basically that's what it is. They are carrying the conference. Half of the conference, you know, when you talk about Clemson, North Carolina, Miami, Florida State, North Carolina State, Virginia, Virginia Tech, these are not just schools, they're brands. Whereas, you know, some of the other members, your Georgia Techs, I mean, Duke's a pretty good brand as far as basketball goes, but outside of that, they are not, you know, every now and then they have an okay football team. They're not a powerhouse football squad. So these seven teams have every right to expect more. And my understanding is what they initially talked about was they wanted a bigger share of the pie.
Yes.
These seven brands felt they should have a bigger share, given the fact that they are the draw of the conference, and they're right. But Eric, you take this a step further, and you look at this, and with the way NIL is now, with the way that you've got places like Missouri, the state of Missouri, instituting this new legislation, which basically equivocates to pay for play, where the coaches now can go in and help negotiate the NIL deals for these recruits and players. If the ACC isn't going to pony up the dough to these schools that are, you know, blue bloods, that are brands, then somebody else is going to, and it's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC. And I think we both know that. You know, you're going to have the rich getting richer and the poor just falling off the face of the earth. I see within the next 5 years, you're going to see the Pac-5 look like one of these or Pac-5. You're going to look like the ACC, look like the Pac-12 or the Big 12.
It might end up being the Pac-5 when it's all
Well,
done.
and you know, we saw that with what was it, the Mountain West breaking away from the WAC, you know, like 25 years ago, and it just decimated both conferences. I don't see that happening because we are in the era of the power conference. So these top tier schools are going to be SEC. They're going to be Big Ten, and you're going to have three conferences in the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC, which I'm just going to call them shell conferences at this point, where they've got a few schools, and then they're filling up with inferior teams from the Group of Five, just to fill a roster, just to say they're a conference.
Yeah.
And despite, like I said, despite what we're being told, the ACC is imploding. I give it 5 years at best before, you know, it's gone.
Yeah. I'm hearing a lot of the experts say 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with that. And then the other thing you have to look at is there is kind of an interesting dynamic from the playoff standpoint as well. Because if the ACC keeps their status, if the Big 12 and Pac 12 keep their status, even though they're doing it with inferior teams, as it's written right now, their best team is going to get into the playoff. They've got a bye.
For 2 years.
Yes.
It'll be rewritten in 2026, but for 2024 and 2025, that's true. That's absolutely true. Robert
And
Allen says a few of those have been trying to join the AAU medical research that the Big Ten requires, and that's good. That's a good point, Robert. However, Nebraska is not an AAU school anymore.
no. And you know
And
what? Notre Dame is not. And
right,
you know right now, if Notre Dame called the Big Ten offices and said, "Listen, we're ready to join," they don't care. That's a
yeah,
big brand. They're going to have them in there tomorrow.
that's our next topic. So we'll get to that.
So
Let's read Donald Hoffer's comment here. It's a good one. I can see Syracuse, Louisville, Pitt, Virginia Tech, and possibly Notre Dame for sports outside of football if they stick to the geographical destinations. However, I'm not entirely sure if some of these schools meet the academic requirements, though. Big Ten academic requirements are no longer what they used to be, by the way. You only have to have a 1.8 GPA to still remain eligible to play sports.
yeah,
Now, by school, that'd be a little bit different, but that's the Big Ten regulations. He also says I would be interested in North Carolina, Duke, NC State, goes north to the Big Ten or goes SEC. So there's a lot of moving parts here, Donald. There's
There
absolutely
are.
is. Okay. Larry Daniel says it's great to be Indiana. Think about this for a second. Lowly Purdue. You ever been to West Lafayette, Chris? We're going to go this year.
I have not been. I'm looking forward to us going over this year.
It's smaller than Toledo,
Yeah.
Ohio. Purdue University is cashing a check from the Big Ten, quadruple what Clemson is from the ACC.
And really, I mean, there's no logical reason that should be happening, Eric. I mean, you think about it. Clemson, at least in terms of football and basketball, have been relevant in the last decade. You know, the only thing that Purdue does is every now and then they stick something up our backside there to screw us out of a run. But Purdue's only real relevance as far as football goes recently has been the fact that occasionally they'll knock off a powerhouse.
Yeah.
They're not out there, performing at the level that Clemson has historically performed at over the last decade.
All right, so here's the rumors. Let me dive into what's going on. So here's what I know for a fact is what this is about. Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, and NC State to a degree. Virginia Tech, Virginia, they're just coming along for the ride of this thing. These schools are deathly afraid that without the revenue that is being produced in, say, the SEC and Big Ten, they are going to fall woefully behind when it
Yes.
comes to football.
Yes.
And that is why they are doing what they are doing. They are hoping, and this is why Virginia and Virginia Tech hitched their wagons here to the other 5 schools. They are hoping that they can go back to the negotiating table with the other 7 schools and say, we pull in more revenue, therefore we want a bigger chunk of the paycheck in
And
order to stay legitimate in college football. It's going to destroy the other 7 schools. It would be like, for Larry Daniels' comment here, Ohio State says, Indiana, you're worth about $15 million. We're going to take from you the other 40 and give them to us. So instead of you getting 90 and us getting 90, you get 15, and now we're going to make 130 million. Do you think with Indiana already can't compete,
right.
that would destroy them? Those other 7 schools are going to be like, no way.
Right.
No way.
Right. And this is the thing. You look at that, and again, maybe Virginia and Virginia Tech, like you said, are making that power play to keep the conference alive, get a bigger chunk of the pie, but also secure those spots as far as, like I said, if they manage to keep the status of a Power Five conference, keep that automatic bid.
Mm-hmm. So, since those other 7 are going to say no, the bigger schools, the Clemson, Miami, Florida State, North Carolina,
Yes.
NC
Yeah.
State, kind of, are are hoping that if they can get out of their contract, they can do one of 2 things. They can either go to a bigger conference, such as the SEC or Big Ten, or go independent and sign a big time deal with a major network like Notre Dame has.
The only thing
Because
is,
the
Eric,
money they would get from that is still greater than what they're getting from the from the ACC. Yes, Chris.
yeah, but I look at that and I could see, as you said, I could see North Carolina being able to pull that off. I could see maybe Clemson being able to pull that off. I mean, yeah, Virginia's a few years removed from a basketball national title, but I don't see them pulling that off. Virginia Tech, I don't see pulling that off. I don't think NC State can pull that off. North Carolina, Clemson, I think they could pull it. Miami and Florida State maybe could pull that off. Although Miami is that team that at the beginning of the year is always a national championship contender, and by the end of the year isn't even in the top 25. They are not the 1980s Jim Kelly, Bernie Kosar, Vinny Testaverde Miami team anymore.
To answer your question, Donald, how much of that money goes into the school academic facility versus the athletic department?
None.
Goose egg. It's all athletic department money. It's actually conference money is what it is, and then it gets
Yeah,
dispensed
between.
after between the major institutions. Now, how they spend that: upgrades in facilities, coaches' salaries, um, the money it takes to fly these kids across country, and here's the big one: your Olympic sports that generate
Yes.
$0.
Yeah.
That's how they keep those scholarships for those kids, the equipment for those kids, the travel, the housing for those kids, all of that. Those sports generate nothing. They're negative. And so without the big football paycheck, those sports go they're cut out. So that's to answer your question, that's what all that money is going to. And eventually it's going to go into players' pockets. Let's just call it like it is.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. Okay, now let's move on to the rumors of who's going where and who's contacted who. I don't work for the Big Ten Network. I don't work for the Big Ten Athletic Department. Okay, so I wasn't receiving these phone calls, but here are the schools that have contacted the Big Ten. From the Pac 12, we already know that Oregon, Washington, and to a degree Stanford have dipped their toe in the Big Ten to acquire about joining the conference. From what we this is out there, this is in the public. The Big Ten has said we will do our homework on Washington and Oregon. They did not say Stanford. I think Stanford has a lot to do with Notre Dame, possibly.
Yes.
Okay. Now, from the ACC, here are the other schools that have contacted the Big Ten who are hoping that if this goes down, they want to be Big Ten members. North Carolina, Virginia, and this one is crazy, Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's been very quiet. Georgia Tech's Atlanta. It's what you now we know the Big Ten likes to go to a big city.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Miami, you're hearing a lot of people about Miami, the Big Ten. I have not heard that they have officially called the Big Ten. North Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia Tech. Now, for the crazy rumor that's out there, if the ACC breaks up and the SEC pulls a couple here and the Big Ten pulls a couple here, what's going to happen to the remaining schools? The Big East is opening their doors again to college football. And they will have the largest mega basketball conference in the country.
Yeah.
So they already have a few schools that still play football, but they're independents.
Right.
Connecticut's one,
UMass, I think, still has a team.
UMass. So Connecticut, UMass, and then you would get, say, Syracuse back, Duke, Pitt, probably Virginia Tech. So there's 6 teams right there. We'll see who else they could maybe Louisville. They'll probably pick.
Yep.
And then the Big East becomes a relevant football, to a degree, a relevant football conference once again. So if the ACC falls apart, look for the Big East to gobble up what's left and try to become a football conference once again with a ginormous basketball conference.
Yeah.
We're talking like 20 plus schools in their basketball conference.
Yeah.
So that's the other crazy rumor. Now, some other teams, these are just rumors. These are just someone could have made these up on message board somewhere. But here are 2 schools that could possibly end up in the Big Ten, both from the state of Texas. TCU,
Mm-hmm.
Dallas Market,
Right.
just was in the college football playoff. And Texas A&M, because they are still butthurt about Texas joining the SEC.
I'm gonna talk about that at the end of the show, Eric.
Okay. Okay. So those are the crazy rumors we're hearing, guys. It's absolutely nuts to think that this could all be happening. Just like NIL, I think is what he went. This is going to have to organize under NCAA umbrella, or it will decimate the sport. It's moving that way, Larry. It's a train that's got too much
And,
momentum,
and
unfortunately.
honestly, I don't think that it needs to be organized under the NCAA. I think we've talked about this before, Eric. At this point, we need a commissioner. We need a Roger Goodell in there to step in and be in charge.
Donald Hoffer, you think Cincinnati will join the Big East if that happens? No, I think they're in bed
No,
with the Big 12. I think them and West Virginia are in the Big 12. I can see the Big 12 going after Virginia Tech too and
I
saying,
could
hey,
too.
we've got that little region of the Appalachian Mountains there in Cincinnati, and that's the coast to coast idea
Hmm.
that the Big Ten is doing. This is the other thing about this that I want to mention before we talk Notre Dame here. The Big Ten was not joke when they said they want to be a coast to coast conference. Where the SEC is located, the Big Ten is trying to do this,
Yep.
circle around them, and it's actually a pretty good strategic move.
Yeah.
In all honesty. So
Yeah.
it's crazy to think about Karen Warren actually had started something kind of smart, but when it comes to this right here, it was actually a pretty good move.
Yes.
That contract with those television companies